This is a clip from Beyond Classified. You can access the entire episode now at rockfin.com/FKN+. Were these deities what we would call gods, actual flesh and blood? Or are they just archetypes or representations of planets or different energies? From everything that you've researched, what's your understanding of that?
Yeah, that's the big question, man. That's jumping to the very last paragraph of my book, but it's all good. We can go there and then just dissect it,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely.
So when I first heard about the Anunnaki, I was in high school, like a freshman or something, and growing up in a religious family, Christian and Catholic, reading Sitchin's work was like mind blowing because he went into great detail about the Old Testament and the Bible and other religions. So some people would say that his work kind of denounces Christianity or whatever, but his work actually brings crucial veracity to all of that in a very mind-bending way. So of course I learned about the Anunnaki through him, and when I first read all that stuff, I was of the mindset, thinking that these were actual extraterrestrials that came from Planet X, Nibiru, and that whole thing. I believed in that wholeheartedly, and I still want to believe that. I mean, I want to
Oh, yeah.
believe, but after all of the research that I did for this book, going through and critically looking at this stuff, critically looking at what's available to us, and making up my own conclusion, I've concluded that these Anunnaki, these people, were actually survivors of a cataclysm. And there's evidence of that, and we can get into that. But I think that they were survivors of a cataclysm that occurred who knows how long ago, and simply wrote themselves into the history of the modern world, the past 6 or 7 thousand years, as gods.
I've heard this before, and this is also something that I consider that our extreme ancient ancestors might have even had advanced consciousness abilities that surpassed everyone else that was beneath them at the time, or they were just a different subspecies of human that had access to different knowledge or consciousness abilities.
Yeah. I mean, if we really think about it, going back to your first question about them creating us, there is evidence for that in the text, the actual text. We have about at least 2 to 3 instances in Sumerian and Babylonian texts where it is stated that they did create us. And in each of those instances, they created us through a mixture of their blood, and sometimes a mixture of their blood and clay, what's called clay, and again, this could all be poetic and rudimentary explanations. When Sitchin read that whole mixing of blood and clay, he took that as a basic explanation for DNA or genetic engineering. So according to the text and according to our ancestors that wrote the text, these beings did create the Homo sapien race, us, the modern human that's been around for the past 6 or so thousand years. But if we stop to think about it, although they were humanoid, they weren't human.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're what we consider human, but we're actually an admixture of some kind of hominid creature. Our early or our late staged hominid ancestor, whoever that was, the quote unquote caveman, and one of their lower ranking people, because they actually didn't use the higher ranking Anunnaki to make us. They used some of the lower ranking DNA, as is speculated. So we're just a mutt. So what we call it, we're human, which is actually a mutt of some hominid and some Anunnaki. But these beings transcend that. They're not human by definition. They are a whole different set of a humanoid species.
Do you think that some of the evidence we might have for that could be elongated skulls and things that researchers like Brian Forrester are finding right now?
I think it definitely ties in. I spoke to him. I had a conversation with him, which is on my YouTube channel. And I also did another video where I just kind of dove into the information myself and actually found something that he didn't really, that he wasn't really aware of or spoke about. And so there's a lot going on there, and I've been trying to unpack it, but there's just so much going on there. And basically to summarize it, there the elongated skulls are found in two primary areas on Earth, and that is in Paracas, Peru,
Yeah.
and that's all the work that Brian Forrester does over there. And then they're also found in large numbers over in Crimea near the Black Sea, the North Black Sea area. And Forrester knows about that. He talks about that. But what's interesting is that the ones in Paracas, Peru, have reddish hair. All of the original ones, the actual ones, the authentic ones, I should say, have reddish hair and have genomes that go back to the Black Sea area, to the Crimea area. And so, and the ones in the Crimea area also have that same red hair. And so when we take that into consideration and look at what was going on in the early, Indo-European time period, there was actually a flood that occurred in the Black Sea. Like I think it's around like 1500 BC. The Black Sea over flooded, and there's some researchers who wrote a book on that in the 90s, and I think it's called like Noah's Flood or something. It's all in my video, but there was a flooding of the Black Sea around 1500 BC, which is right around the same time that the Paracas people ended up in Peru. So there must have been a flood during that time, or some kind of cataclysm, which caused these elongated head people with red hair from the Crimea Black Sea area to disperse. And this was right around the same time that the Indo-European migration was happening. And what that is, it's a theory, but it's a theory that historians use to explain, all these different languages and cultures in the Western world that have a similar root, right? Because all the Western languages, Germanic, English, all of those things, all have a common root. And even as of right now, it is said that Sanskrit is that root, but there's probably something older than that. So what I'm getting at is that there's a root, there was a hub of original nomadic people or something in that area, the Indo-European people. And then there was some kind of cataclysms or whatever that drove them all to disperse. And one of those people were the elongated people who ended up in Paracas, Peru with the red hair. And looking at that sounds awfully familiar, because in the Bible, we are told that, the angels, the fallen angels mixed with mankind. And out of that was birthed the Nephilim. And then God tried to flood and drown them out and kill them. But the Bible clearly states that they were alive in those days and after those days. So if I had to guess who these elongated skull people were, I think they were the Nephilim. I think they were the mixture of some of these fallen angels and us. And they were trying to escape persecution or whatever, just find some peaceful place to live out their days.
Do you think that these were the same peoples that were the ancient builders of megalithics? You were talking about that there is evidence of a global civilization through language. Well, there's also that through a lot of the construction methods from our ancient ancestors. Could these be connected to what we call Anunnaki?